Hi everyone, Professor Davis here, and today we are having our very last live lecture of the term. So good job, and just keep up the hard work. You've got one final lesson to go, which actually closes very soon, so just kind of something to keep in mind there. Don't forget that for this module, the last day to submit your assignments in either the Module 6 discussion or also the Module 6 written assignment is going to be Friday at 11:59 p.m. So just keep that in mind as you're working towards those due dates to ensure that you are completing everything before the course closes. I can't stress this enough, guys, but late assignments cannot be accepted for credit. So please make sure you are submitting your work by Friday at 11:59 p.m. I know sometimes I do accept late assignments, but because this is our final week and final grades must be posted, I will have to do a cutoff of Friday at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. So just something to keep in mind there. But let's not dwell too much on that. Instead, let's look at our agenda today. Today, we are going to be discussing the myths of communication. We're going to talk about what is conflict. We're also going to go over your Module 6 discussion. And don't forget that there are altered due dates because this is the final module. So like I said, your final day to post to the discussion board, Module 6 discussion board, and also to submit your Module 6 written assignment is Friday at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. Late posts and late assignments cannot be accepted for credit. So, myths of communication. I think it's important to talk about the myths of communication, especially since we're right here at the end of this course. You know, it's something that is something that we've all been guilty of from time to time, and I think it's things we need to discuss because a lot of times the myths we believe in regards to communication can contribute to our conflict scenarios and situations in both our personal and professional lives. So what are the myths of communication? Well, here's a few that I've listed. Myth one, communication is a cure-all. We've probably heard that our entire lives, guys, that communication is a cure-all. Okay, let's talk about that. Communication is not this magical fixer of things, you know, in either our personal or professional lives or even the group setting, but rather communication should be used as a tool to help solve problems which can arise in relationships in the group setting or whatever it might be. So communication, just because you're communicating doesn't mean that you're doing so effectively. It doesn't mean that you're doing so in a healthy manner or productive manner. Communication can't cure everything, but it can be a great tool to help us solve issues. Myth number two, communication can break down. Well, it doesn't exactly happen like that, guys. I know a lot of times we say things, and I'm even guilty of saying this every now and then that, you know, we had a communication breakdown when we tried to discuss whatever. Well, communication can never really break down completely. Because we're human, we're always communicating something, whether we want to or not. A lot of times we're not even intentionally communicating things, but we're still making that communication. I'm someone that tends to be very expressive on my face. You know, I've often heard it stated that I wear my emotions on my face. So, you know, some people have called me animated in the past, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, but I'm someone that can really has a lot of emotion shown in my face. So I have to be really aware of this because I don't want to hurt or offend other people just because, you know, I made a slip up like that. So basically, I communicate even when I don't necessarily want to do so. For instance, let's say someone handed me, and this happened to me this past weekend, we actually had a little get together at my house, and one of my friends asked me, she's like, "Hey, I made these homemade cookies. Would you like to try them?" Sure. Well, I bit into it, and I'm sure it was all over my face, and I have to make myself aware of that, so because I would never intentionally hurt her feelings. I don't want to communicate something negative to her. I want to be kind. But, you know, a lot of times just by our facial expressions can tell a different story. She didn't cook down the flour and the baking soda and all that in the cookies, so it was really just tasted like you were eating flour. So it wasn't the best thing in the world. But like I said, I would never intentionally hurt someone. So we have to be aware of the fact that we're always communicating, whether we want to or not. So, you know, whether we're intending to give that message or we've just let it slip, you know, in our mind that that we're communicating through our body language and our facial expressions and so forth, we have to just make sure that we're being aware of these things. So as you can see, basically communication never breaks down. It's just not sometimes going how you want it to go. All right, myth 3. Effective communication is merely skill building. Not at all. Some people believe that you can just pick up a few communication skills here and there like you would a few little staple items at the grocery store, and you're good to go as far as communication goes. You know, you've taken one communication class and now you're a pro. Well, this couldn't be farther from the truth. Without really understanding all the aspects of communication and studying it over time, this myth of, I've got these skills and they're perfect and that's all there is to it. It can be harmful to people. Just like a relationship, I've told you this in the past, to think about a relationship as a living, breathing being, as something that's constantly evolving, constantly developing, and constantly changing. We should always keep that in mind with our communication as well. So we need to continue to build on these skills throughout our entire lives. We need to continue to build on our techniques that we try and things like that. So communication is not just a skill building, it's something that should evolve with us over time and throughout our lives. And then we have myth 4. Effective communication is just common sense. I know a lot of times people enroll in communication classes and they say, you know what, this is just common sense. I don't know why I have to take a communication class. But then they dive into the material and they go, oh wow, this is a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Well, if we are if we're really honest with ourselves, even the best of us need to learn how to more effectively communicate with other people. Um, if communication was just common sense, then why do we often miscommunicate our ideas to other people? Or why do we end up in conflict situations if communication is just common sense and it's that easy? Well, I think that's something to think about, and that's why I want to talk about what is conflict. So let me just go ahead and put this on the table, guys. I'm going to share this with you because it's another myth that I'm kind of starting this slide off with, is that, conflict can be managed, that it's conflict is not a part of healthy relationships. That's not true at all, guys. Conflict is inevitable. Even in the best relationships, you're going to have conflict from time to time. Now, you will have conflict in both your personal and your professional lives throughout your entire lifetime. However, it's being able to identify the conflict and deal with it in a healthy manner that helps us to improve our relationships with other people. So let's start here. What is conflict? Well, conflict is more than just a simple disagreement. It's personal and could even be described as a type of angry disagreement. So it has a lot more emotions involved in it generally. Conflict generally involves heated emotions and can even threaten our relationships if it's not resolved in a healthy manner. Now, 4 facts are generally present for a disagreement to actually be considered a conflict. Um, 2 people are interdependent, they need something from each other, or both parties blame the other and find fault with them for causing the problem, or one or more of the parties is angry or emotionally upset, or the parties' behaviors are affecting the relationship with each other and or their relationship with others. So you can see that conflict is a lot more in depth than just a general disagreement, because we can always agree to disagree. But when it comes to conflict, it's a lot more emotionally charged and can really threaten the very heart of any relationship. So with that in mind, let's look at constructive and destructive conflict. Did you know that conflict can be a good thing if it's handled in a healthy manner? Well, it can be, and that's something I try to stress to my students a lot, because I don't think that they truly understand that conflict can be a good thing. Now, allow me to explain a little bit. Conflict can lead to personal or relationship growth, because you are asserting yourself and you're asserting your needs more and you're really discussing things on a deeper level. It also leads to a deeper level of intimacy because, like I said, you're often, when you're in a conflict situation, it's because you're talking about something that's a little deeper rooted in your life. So it can, if handled in a healthy manner, it can deepen your level of intimacy. And also, conflict can help us to better understand our partner's needs. Something I generally hear from my students is, the way I handle conflict is to walk away from the situation. I just don't like conflict. Well, remember what I said, guys. Conflict is inevitable. While you may think that it's healthy to avoid conflict and to walk away from the situation, it's generally not the best approach. Allowing time for the situation or the person to cool off is perfectly fine, but I always suggest revisiting the issue when your emotions aren't quite so high. Avoidance often is just basically you ignoring the issue that's there. There was a reason you had this conflict. You can't just ignore it because it's gonna come at you again in the future. And if you choose to if you choose to avoid conflict, this can often cause resentment in relationships because nothing was ever really addressed. It can cause what we call gunny sacking, and gunny sacking is basically perhaps you're in an argument with your significant other 2 weeks down the road, and you say, you know what? I knew this was going to happen. You always lied. Don't you remember that time that you lied to me about this and you weren't truthful and you're just a liar? Okay, those are harsh words, obviously, but gunny sacking is basically where we mudsling at people. We throw things from their past or past situations back in their face, even though it might not be relevant to that situation at the time. But it's a way of just kind of smacking them in the face with their wrongdoings. And avoidance can also lead to just overall anger issues and more in relationships because really avoidance of conflict can be poisonous to relationships. So that's something to keep in mind. The goal should not be to avoid conflict, but rather to manage it so that it's useful to the relationship. Okay, so we're going to take a look back at these four communication styles that we discussed last lesson. As we've discussed, there are four basic communication styles. We have passive communication styles, and that's where the individual generally gives into the demands of others and never really asserts their own opinions or thoughts. Then we have assertive communication styles, and that's a communication style. If you remember, I used myself as an example on this. But an assertive communication style is an individual who's generally pretty clear with his or her communication. They're generally open and firm and fluent in their dialogue. They're not forceful or passive, but kind of a happy medium in between. Now, remember what I said though. Assertive communication doesn't mean that you're being rude, or if you find yourself saying, I'm assertive because I'm always speak what's on my mind, I have no filter. No, that's not assertive, guys. That is aggressive and just rude. So, assertive communication means that you openly discuss your opinion, but you're still respectful of other people's opinions as well. You're open to hearing them out. Although you might be firm with your belief system, you are at least willing to listen, and you're never disrespectful with your tone or your words or even your body language. Okay, and then we have aggressive communication style, and that's kind of what I was talking about when people often say they don't have a filter or things like that. This often means they're aggressive with their communication, and that's never a good thing. Individuals usually tend to fall in this category if they choose when and where the communication takes place. For instance, if you don't want to talk anymore and you just give everybody the cold shoulder, that's kind of aggressive, guys. In fact, it's actually a little passive aggressive, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if you're someone that tends to dominate the conversation, and you're very demanding with your tone, and you're very forceful in your communication, and maybe even you're one of those people, like I said, that say they don't have a filter, and they say what's on their mind, that can be intimidating to other people as well, and not in a good way. Aggressive communication is never respectful of other people, and it's something we always have to be aware of to try to tone down a bit and strive to be more assertive instead. And lastly, we have passive aggressive communication style, and basically that's just the middle ground between, being passive and being aggressive. So emotions, basically with this type of communication style, the individual is generally a hybrid of that passive or and that aggressive style. Outwardly, there is no general visible signs of aggression. However, emotions such as anger and resentment or even negativity, um, they're usually done indirectly. So, with that being said, let's look at this. So, which is the best approach for handling conflict? Well, in my opinion, is to be assertive. And that's because we're not being disrespectful, but we're not avoiding the conflict either. We're not being passive aggressive with our tendencies. Instead, we're just being open and firm and fluent with our dialogue. All right, so let's discuss your assignments for the week. You have the Module 6 discussion. You should have already posted your initial post by Tuesday. In this discussion, let's talk about what you're doing. Basically, I'd like you to think about a conflict you've experienced either in the workplace or maybe even with a significant personal relationship. So any type of conflict in your personal or professional life. And then I want you to describe the situation briefly and consider which response to conflict was demonstrated by either you or the other person in the conflict. I want you to include in your discussion the types of power you and the other person in the conflict may have exhibited. And I also want you to answer the following questions using specific strategies from our readings and other course materials. Okay, so answer these questions as well. What communication strategies did you use to resolve the conflict? What kind of power are you showing? What kind of power was the other person showing? And look at other elements of communication such as verbal, nonverbal, cultural, and etc. Then pick two elements from the example of conflict that you previously gave and discuss how these may affect the situation. Now remember that the course closes Friday at 11:59 p.m. So you will need to have your assignments posted and submitted by then. Initial posts were due on Tuesday, while all reply posts are due on Friday. Late submissions cannot be accepted this week for credit at all, so please make sure you adhere to the deadline of Friday at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. There's a title on the slide. It disappeared on me. Okay, well, what this is the Module 6 written assignment. So we've already finished our communication practicum project, and now we're just doing our final assignment, which is the written assignment for Module 6. So for this assignment, this quarter, I want you to think about this. This quarter, you have worked so hard on multiple levels of communication. Now you need to summarize your learning. So what I want you to do, and this is called the 3-2-1 assignment. So what I want you to do is first describe 3 personal scenarios where you have utilized some of the learning from this quarter. Any of the concepts at all we've covered in the course could be used as an example. But 3 personal scenarios from your life where you've utilized something we've learned this quarter. Maybe it was conflict management. Maybe it was determining your own communication style. You know, it could be anything, guys, that we've learned this quarter. Next, discuss 2 communication situations where you have shown personal growth based on the materials you've learned. So perhaps you want to talk about, for instance, one of these might be how you used to have a very aggressive communication style, but after reading about the 4 different kinds of communication styles, you'd like to work more towards being assertive instead of aggressive. That could be one situation, and you could talk about how you're working on that in your personal life. And then next, I'd like you to describe one way you may have changed over the last 5 weeks. Maybe you're working to create win-win conflict situations with your significant other or your husband or wife or whatever. You know, whatever it might be. What is one thing that you've learned from this course that has helped you to change over the past 5 weeks? Now remember that this paper should follow proper APA style guidelines. It should include a properly formatted title page and reference page, everything we've been working on this term. Also, the course, like I said, is closing. This assignment is due on Friday, not Sunday, on Friday by 11:59 p.m. Central Time. All right, so what is your code word this week? Your code word this week is going to be Friday. Friday. Why is it Friday? Because I want you to remember that your final day of the course is Friday and that no submissions can be accepted past that point. So your code word this week is Friday. Otherwise, keep up the hard work, guys. You guys have done wonderful so far in this course. I'm so proud of you. My best wishes on your future endeavors, excuse me. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you this term, and I hope to perhaps have you in one of my future courses. I also teach visual communication in the media if you're interested. So thank you so much and have a great week. And don't forget to submit your code word of Friday, because that is the final day of the course and the final day I can accept submissions at 11:59 p.m. Central Time on Friday. Thank you.